Really strong New Zealand.
And more gold for India also in table tennis. India regains the gold medal in the table tennis final. Player Harmeet Desai leads India to a historic win under Sharad Kamal's captaincy. But first, the big story that's breaking this evening. US Speaker Nancy Pelosi has landed in Taiwan amidst warnings from China. In a statement upon her arrival in Taiwan, Pelosi has said the delegation's visit honors America's unwavering commitment to support Taiwan's vibrant democracy. She's the first high-level US official to visit Taiwan in 25 years. China says the visit by a number 3 official cannot be treated as an unofficial visit. And clearly, there has been saber rattling on the Chinese side and threats and high-pitched rhetoric at the moment over that visit of Nancy Pelosi. Divya Gopalan, Foreign Affairs Editor at Taiwan Plus, joins us at this moment. Divya, how is this visit being perceived? Is there a genuine sense of unease and a possibility of any kind of Chinese retaliation? Is there any possibility seen of any Chinese retaliation? How is it being perceived, this visit?
I believe you're talking to me. I'm afraid the line isn't very clear at all. I believe you're asking me about Chinese retaliation or possible Chinese retaliation. So China has sent warships to that median line that separates Taiwan and China. They've also sent planes to that line that separates China and Taiwan. We're hearing that there are incursions into the air defense zone. But, you know, that is something that they do quite often whenever there's a high-level delegation visiting Taiwan. China does not like Taiwan having any legitimacy on an international stage, and having government officials from other countries visit Taiwan to China means it's a threat to China's claims over Taiwan, and it gives support to Taiwan as a sovereign nation on its own. And then nothing angers China more than that. But what we do know is that China has yet to cross over that air defense zone into Taiwan's own airspace or even cross into Taiwan's soil. Now, if that happens, that is very likely to lead to a potentially larger conflict, because every time China sends any planes or any kind of military equipment or vehicles into that air defense zone or into that median line, Taiwan has to scramble. If it is the air defense zone, Taiwan has to scramble jets into that airspace to monitor that kind of activity and even try to dissuade China's planes from going further. So if China's planes do go further, Taiwan then has to react. And what that can escalate to is anyone's guess. But what we also know is that China's military is far stronger than Taiwan's any day. China's powerful People's Liberation Army, China has said, will not stand idly by when Nancy Pelosi visits. And China, of course, has one of the most powerful and strongest militaries in the world. And Taiwan's military just pales in comparison. So what can Taiwan do to protect itself? Well, the U.S. by law has to give Taiwan the means to protect itself. So that suddenly draws in the U.S. to this potential conflict that could happen. And now the question is, do either the U.S. or China, those superpowers, actually want to enter that kind of scenario at this point in time? So all of these military maneuvers and all of military movements are being watched very closely. Is it just threats? Is it just rhetoric? Or is there going to be actual action taken?
Divya Gopalan, for that very comprehensive update on all that's happening. I appreciate you joining me there from Taiwan. The very latest coming in. Remember, this is now being seen as the latest global flashpoint. There was another flashpoint this morning globally, because in a major airstrike in Kabul, the United States has killed one of the world's most wanted terrorists, Al-Qaeda chief alZawahiri. alZawahiri was killed in a drone strike in Kabul, just outside his house there. Here's the other big story of the day.
First Osama bin Laden, now Ayman alZawahiri. US avenging the deadly September 11th attacks on its soil, which killed nearly 3,000 Americans. 11 years after eliminating Osama bin Laden, US forces caught up with his number two, the Al-Qaeda's Zawahiri. At the balcony of his safe house in a posh Kabul locality of Shirpur, walking distance from the erstwhile US embassy, a Hellfire missile fired by a Reaper drone took out the Al-Qaeda chief, who was possibly standing and staring at the Kabul skyline. The missile, equipped with 6 razor-like blades and without a warhead, is said to have sliced right through Zawahiri. But there's no way to confirm that that's precisely how he died. Images of the strike showed smoke billowing from the hideout and a shattered balcony, even though there was no explosion.
And what we know, according to senior administration officials here, who did brief reporters just before President Biden spoke, is that they had detected the movement of Zawahiri's family back to Kabul. And that's what led them to keep an eye on this particular building. And then they started to notice this man standing on the balcony a lot, very similar to what we saw with Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad.
The Al-Qaeda chief was sheltered by Taliban's interior minister and Pakistan terror stooge Sirajuddin Haqqani's close aide, revealing a clear Pakistan nexus. The US called the elimination of al-Zawahiri after Osama as justice served.
Justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more. People around the world no longer need to fear the vicious and determined killer. The United States continues to demonstrate our resolve and our capacity to defend the American people against those who seek to do us harm. You know, we make it clear again tonight that no matter how long it takes, no matter where you hide, if you are a threat to our people, the United States will find you and take you out.
Hunting down the Al-Qaeda chief was a task for US forces and intelligence agencies, coming as it does over 2 decades after the 9/11 attacks. While bin Laden's hideout was covered with a 7-foot wall, al-Zawahiri was visible to CIA drones when he was strolling in his balcony. Biden was briefed about the Kill Zawahiri operation 2 months ago. In July, the operation plan was presented to him along with the model of the Al-Qaeda chief's house in Kabul. President Biden ordered the attack on July the 25th, and it was on the 31st of July that the Al-Qaeda head was eventually killed. The US and Taliban blamed each other for breaching the Doha Pact after the killing. The war on terror continues. Bureau Report, India Today.
Indian economy, compared to the situation prevailing in many of our peer groups and compared to the situation in many of the developed economies, is definitely much better.
आपने पालने से लेके कब्र तक कोई ऐसा मसला नहीं छोड़ा है जिस पे जीएसटी ना लगी हुई हो। कफन का कपड़ा ओढ़ने के बाद सर, कफन में जेब नहीं होती है सर, हम सब जानते हैं। उसकी जेब पहले ही आपने ढीली कर दी।
It's a matter of record that all states agreed to the proposal. I put it on record.
If you add the 3 numbers up, 20, 7 और 29, एक नंबर मिलता है सर 56. क्या बात है? 56 इंच सर.
Performance of the Indian rupee is much better than its own peers.
We are a classroom sitting here with students. On this we walk out. You don't want to give us a chance to even express ourselves.
Now, for the last 2 days, Parliament has seen a long and often acrimonious debate over what many believe is the issue of our times: inflation, price rise, and the state of the economy. Lots of arguments have been made on both sides by the government and the opposition. So we thought, good time to do a fact check. Where does the truth really lie on issues like inflation? Joining us now, two very special guests, Manoj Twari, who was the lead speaker of the Congress party on that debate in the Lok Sabha, and the Vice President of the Bharatiya Janata Party, Mr. Jai Panda. Appreciate both of you joining us. I'm going to break this down into specific questions. The first question that I want to raise, Nirmala Sitharaman, Finance Minister, said inflation is a global problem. Is that a good enough reason is the question we will raise. But first, listen in to what Nirmala Sitharaman had to say.
Indian economy, compared to the situation prevailing in many of our peer groups and compared to the situation in many of the developed economies, is definitely much better. But that does not mean that we are running away from saying, because, like some of the members have said, imported inflation, and because of the imported supply chain related problems and global commodity prices, we are being impacted. These are realities and we are here to answer and discuss on them. हम भाग नहीं रहे। और ये भी सच्चाई है कि नंबर्स के मुताबिक भी हमारे इन्फ्लेशन रेट का एक बैंड रहता है। 4 is the median point, -2 or +2 is what is normally accommodated. And we are at 7 with some effort. Or it can be slightly more than 7, but we have made sure that the Reserve Bank and the government put together are taking enough steps to make sure that it is kept at 7 or below, ideally below 6, the band.
Manoj Twari, respond to what you've heard. The fact is that inflation is a global problem at 7.01%. India is better off than many countries. The US at 9.1%, UK 9.4%. The world, Russia at 15.9%. We are better off.
Well, Rajdeep, the question is that are we really better off? Or is this really a mythical play of numbers? Now, if you were to look at the wholesale price index, headline inflation has been in double digits, now going back 14 months, which essentially puts you right in the middle of the second wave of COVID-19. And now comes the paradox. The existing paradox is that consumer food price index was at 1.96% in the April of 2021. It climbed to 8.38% in the April of 2022, before moderating slightly to 7.75% in the June of 2022. Now, what this essentially means is that you had already started going up the inflationary curve even as we were getting into the second wave of COVID-19. And the food price inflation actually followed the headline inflation number. So it is not something which is a consequence of the Russian-Ukrainian war or gas supply lines, as the government would like to make it out to be. In fact, the problem really dates back in time, and had the government taken effective measures to address it, they may have ended up arresting it.
So you are actually saying that the inflation pressures had begun even pre-Russia-Ukraine war. Therefore, you claim that the government of India cannot solely blame the supply deficiencies, linkage breaks because of war for rising inflation. Am I correct? Is that how I understand it?
You're absolutely correct. And may I also add another thing, that you see, the Russian-Ukrainian war started on the 26th of February 2022. Now, most of the sub-Saharan African countries have been badly hit primarily because grain imports from Ukraine came down to 0. But India does not import grain. In fact, if I can put it a little cynically, we have been beneficiaries of the Russian-Ukrainian war so far because we bought oil, crude oil at discounted prices from Russia. We've actually got fertilizer at discounted prices from Russia, because essentially they are trying to sell around the world to fill up their war chest. So in a very perverse sense of the word, till now we've been beneficiaries of that conflict rather than being victims.
Okay. Jai Panda, you want to respond to that? Because when I look at the numbers, the fact is that wholesale inflation in particular, even pre-Ukraine, was in double digits. December 2021, 14.27, January 2022, 13.68, February 2022, 13.11. So inflation was already steadily climbing.
Rajdeep, this is one of those rare situations where a global event, in this case the conflict in Ukraine, has had a severely negative impact on almost every country in the world. And it's not just about grains, as you know, it's also about fuel. And the reality is that while India has managed to keep its inflation, and what is really important for the Indian citizen, the common citizen, is not the wholesale price index, but the consumer price index. And so that has been kept at just above 7%, which is actually quite a remarkable feat because, you know, if you look at other nations, you look at the US, for instance, has more than 9% inflation, which is something like a tripling or a quadrupling of their typical inflation. And the same thing goes for many other very strong economies, whether it is in the UK or other European countries. This came on top of another black swan event, which was the COVID pandemic, which hit all countries in the world. Now, the reality is India bounced back better than almost every other country and has been showing high growth rates and has been controlling inflation far better than any other country. Now, I can keep on giving you statistics, but as the finance minister quoted, let me also quote a former RBI governor who is a very well-known economist, Raghuram Rajan, and he is particularly celebrated by my friend Manoj Twari's party, who has on the record just this week stated that India has done a remarkably good job of managing inflation vis-a-vis other countries, especially our neighbors. And he has gone on to say that his successors at the RBI today have done a remarkable job in keeping the Indian economy in very fine fettle. Now, let me explain. This is important because these are global factors which are affecting every other country, and India has done far better than every other country. Now, sometimes inflation happens due to poor domestic policies, as when the UPA government term ended and when the Modi government began, we inherited an inflation rate of more than 9%, and that was not related to any significant global event in 2014. It was because of policy paralysis internally. And so here you have celebrated economists whom the Congress party reveres, saying that India under the Modi government has done a stupendous job in managing its domestic policies and managing inflation.
I was expecting the BJP to look at 2012 to 2014. Whenever inflation is looked at in 2022, we go back to 2012 to 2014. I might remind you, of course, there was the taper tantrum also around that time. But a quick response from you, Manoj Twari, to what you heard, that according to Jai Panda, at 7%, and as I said, compared to the rest of the world, India has done a reasonable job in controlling inflation.
Well, Rajdeep, Jay has tried to put a very interesting spin onto it, but the fact remains that when the UPA was in government, if you had high inflation, you also had high growth. So therefore, if you look at UPA 1, the average year-on-year growth rate was 8.36%. The average year-on-year growth rate for UPA 2 was about 7.68%. So on an average, we did talk about 8% year-on-year growth for 10 long years. But what do you see in this particular case? You are seeing low growth and high inflation. And let me give you the numbers. 2017-18, and this is a year after the infamous demonetization, growth was at 6.8%. It comes down to 6.6% the next year, down to 3.7%, then minus 6.6%, which of course was the COVID-19 year, and then goes up to 8.9%, but that's a statistical history. Because you start from such a low base, you are actually doing 2.3%. So essentially what India is facing today is a double whammy. You have low growth and you have high inflation. And that's the point of departure from the UPA years, which they love to quote. Because in the UPA years, you had high growth, but yes, you had high inflation.
You know, to add to that, and Jay, I will ask you to pick up on the second question. Low growth, high inflation, you're free to respond to that. I know you're not, you're shaking your head. But the second big question is on oil prices, because many have believed that this, in a way, has kick-started inflation. Who is to blame, centre or states? During the debate in Parliament, it was suggested by members of the government that the UPA years, the oil bonds issued, were partly responsible for high fuel prices. But the fact is, Jai Panda, you've never passed the burden even of low global oil prices onto the consumer. Instead, we are now seeing windfall profits being made by many of the oil companies, but the benefits never pass on to the consumer. So the charge being made is, even before the Russia-Ukraine war, oil prices were not in keeping with international global prices, and we paid a heavy cost for it. A, who do you blame for it? And B, if you want to respond to what Manoj Twari said earlier.
Yes, first of all, you said the benefits have not been passed on to the consumer. Now that's completely wrong, because the massive investments India has made in solar energy, which is now third in the world, would not have been possible without those revenues. And that ultimately benefits the Indian consumer, because it keeps energy prices overall, in the basket of energy prices, under control. Now, I must respond to something Manish said. He said something quite odd, that the Ukraine crisis has actually benefited India. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Ukraine crisis has not benefited any country in the world. It has affected oil prices. As I said, India had bounced back from COVID and continues to bounce back with high growth rates. Inflation was reasonable compared to all other countries and remains very reasonable. I will again quote not only Raghuram Rajan, but reports that have recently come out by Bloomberg and by Deloitte, two major financial institutions on the global scene. Now, to talk about low growth rate and high inflation is actually extremely odd, because India has just become the fastest growing large economy in the world, and lower inflation than the US, for instance. By the way, the US has just gone into recession with two successive quarters of negative growth. And in this scenario, for India to be hailed by global financial markets as the leading light in rebooting the global economy is something remarkable. And you can keep going back to the history, but the reality is, when the UPA government started, it had inherited from the earlier NDA government high growth and low inflation, and that sustained with a momentum for a few years and then crashed because of policy paralysis. So that the average is not important. What is important is, at the end of the UPA tenure, we had extremely high inflation and extremely low growth rate. And today, we have the highest growth rate among large economies in the world, and we have lower inflation than all major economies. That's just a plain fact.
Jai Panda, do you want to though respond to oil prices? The fact is that we've steadily seen, even when oil prices were low between 2015 and 17, the benefits were never passed on to consumer. Instead, you made, by some estimates, a whopping amount, 25,000 crores and more, 25 lakh crores and more from your oil revenues. That's the reality.
Rajdeep, I responded to this question earlier. You are keeping on repeating it. Let me respond again. I said the revenues, the resources that accrued from that have been reinvested massively in the energy sector to take India to the third largest installation of solar power in the world. Who do you think that benefits? That benefits the Indian consumer in one way or another. Now, the second thing is, you said windfall profits. India did impose windfall taxes on the oil companies operating in India because of the rise in oil prices, which is purely an international phenomenon. India is subject to international oil prices like almost, very few other countries to this extent of dependence. And to change that is the massive investment that's happening in renewable and other forms of energy, which India can find a sustainable source going forward.
Manoj Twari, you want to respond to what you've now heard from Jai Panda, particularly on oil prices?
Well, again, I think my friend Mr. Jai Panda is in a bit of a difficult situation. Let me give you some numbers. Between 2014 and 2022, the government collected 27.2 lakh crores in terms of excise and in terms of income tax and dividend from the oil company. The breakdown is 3,625 crores from excise duty and 4,23,775 crores from income tax and dividend. Now, they keep repeating that oil bonds is the cause that why they had to collect so much of money. The total quantum of oil bonds which has been discharged in the last 8 years, and which is almost about 95%, is 93,000 crores. So you collect 27 lakh crores, you keep blaming 93,000 crores, and those oil bonds were taken out essentially to ensure that the price of elevated crude oil prices is not passed on to the people, and then you want to turn it into a virtue. Rajdeep, let me give you some numbers. In the April of 2011, crude was at $150 US. Petrol was at 58.56 per liter. In the July of 2022, crude is at $98.94 US. Petrol is at 96.72 per liter. On the 1st of March 2014, LPG cylinder was 410 rupees. Today, an LPG cylinder is 1,003 rupees. So therefore, even if the oil bonds which were taken out, essentially to ensure that the impact of high crude oil prices is not passed on to the consumer, the total burden just comes to 93,000 and some odd crore.
But Mr. Tiwari, the one question in your numbers is that state revenues have also benefited. Let's be very clear. It's not just the center. The states have also benefited from the various taxes that have been imposed on fuel, because ultimately oil is the revenue that both state governments, whether Congress ruled, opposition ruled, and the BJP are benefiting from.
Well, Rajdeep, the centre takes the lead on a large number of issues. If the centre would have moderated excise duties, the states would have also fallen in line, and many states have actually moderated excise duties over a period of time. Let me give you an example. In Punjab, while the excise on petrol is higher, the excise on diesel has always been lower, primarily because that is something which is an agrarian fuel which is consumed by the farmers for the purpose of cultivation. So essentially this argument is a bit insidious that we've had to collect 27 lakh crores, and even solar energy. I mean, I would love to be enlightened. What is the share of solar energy in India's energy mix today? I do not think it should be more than 3 or 4%. So therefore, those massive investments that Jay has talked about, have those massive investments really fructified into any tangible gain to the consumer, who, if you would have passed on the benefit of lower oil prices, would have actually had to pay 50 rupees per litre rather than paying almost double.
Jay, you want to quickly respond?
Yes, Rajdeep, I think you asked a very valid question to Manish, which I don't think got a good response, which is the fact that following the union government's lead, the BJP-run state governments all reduced their taxes on fuel to help the average citizen, which the states run by Manish's party, albeit there are very few of them now, they did not match. But the second thing I'd like to say is that, Manish is a great wordsmith and orator, and, undervalued by his party. I think he should have more important responsibilities. But he's not an accountant. And so there is a basic principle of accounting called double entry accounting. He talked about all the oil revenues and raised questions about how much solar has actually been set up. Again, let me repeat that India has now set up the third largest increase in solar capacity in the world. And this has happened just in the last 3-4 years in the Modi government. The more important thing is, for double entry accounting, you have to keep in track that the revenues from the fuel sector, oil sector, doesn't only go back into oil or solar. Remember this, during the pandemic period, now for more than 2.5 years, the union government has given food aid to 800 million Indians continuously every month for now nearly 2.5 years. 800 million Indians every month, extra food aid under the Pradhan Mantri Jan Kalyan scheme. So, this would not have been possible without some of these revenues. And these are the people who have specifically benefited, who would have been harmed by high inflation. So the basic needs of the largest majority of Indians has been taken care of through government intervention while maintaining inflation lower than almost every other country. I think that is a remarkable performance, and that's why Manish and his colleagues continue to turn a blind eye to what people like Raghuram Rajan and Deloitte and Bloomberg keep saying, praising the Modi government.
You know, I want to come to the question of recession because...
Allow me to just respond to that, Rajdeep,
yes, please go ahead.
I think Jay made a very important point. First of all, the share of solar energy in India's energy mix is about 10.6%. That tells its own story. But be that as it may, you know, on this food aid to 800 million people, let us rewind back to 2013 when the National Food Security Act was passed. The National Food Security Act covered about 77% of the population of India. It was not EPL or APL. It covered, you know, almost 3/4 of the population of this country. So therefore, from 2013 to even before the pandemic hit us, almost 3/4 of the population of this country was getting wheat, it was getting rice, and was getting coarse grains at 3 rupees, 2 rupees, and 1 rupee respectively. So therefore, you know, now to turn around and say that we took away those 3, 2, and 1 rupee and really, you know, passed on a great benefit to the people of India, with great respect, I may say, is insidious because COVID-19. 77% of the population of this country is getting subsidized and heavily subsidized food grains under the National Food Security Act.
Okay, let me come therefore to the final question, which is, I think, an underlying theme, which was in that debate, which was about recession. Indian economy, is it better placed than others? Are we less likely or zero possibility, as has been suggested, of going into recession? Let's listen into what Nirmala Sitharaman said.
A Bloomberg survey, which was done by economists, has said that zero probability of India slipping into recession. So it's not just me saying, there is zero probability of India slipping into recession.
Manish Tiwari, you want to respond to that? That is being held up by the government as a sign. Again, it comes back to where we started. Are we better placed than other countries has been a central theme of the government's response during the price rise debate.
Well, I do hope and pray that India does not go into a recession. But having said that, when you make a comparison with the United States of America or Japan, you're really making an erroneous comparison for the simple reason those economies are 16 or 18 trillion dollar economies, and their growth rate has historically been at about 2 or 3%. So the possibility of those economies slipping into what is a technical recession has always been higher than India. In fact, at various points in time, when you've not had these black swan events, you know, the US economy has slipped into recession. But for a country like India, where you require 8% economic growth in order to serve the employment and the other needs of the country, and to think of going into recession from those numbers that unfortunately are not visible today because of the mismanagement since 2016, you know, would be extremely unfortunate.
Okay, Jai Panda, you know, the opposition says the opposition says that post 2008, post the financial crisis, when the UPA was under pressure, the NDA kept pointing out at various numbers to expose the UPA government. Now, when the numbers are not looking so good, the general line of government's defense is, look, we are doing better than the rest of the world. Now, for many, that's not good enough. There is a job cry. Why not admit that some of the data suggests the glass is half empty? There are some good points. We're not in a V-shaped recovery. It could well be a K-shaped recovery. There's a declining growth. Why not accept this rather than saying all is well, look at the rest of the world, we are better off?
Rajdeep, it's bizarre that you are repeating Manish's point as a question, because post-2008, the UPA government's underbelly was shown up because of their policy paralysis. The Indian economy tanked. And all those numbers, high inflation, low growth, are there on the record. Right now, we have had two major global crises. One, the pandemic, and the conflict in Ukraine. And the numbers are very clear. The fastest growing large economy in the world is India. So, I mean, obviously we should celebrate that. And lower inflation than almost every other country. Of course, we should celebrate that. It's not a question of saying we're doing better than the world. The whole world has been impacted and we have done better. It's a fact. Now, let me point out that you asked about recession and stagflation. Your viewers need to know the exact definition. The definition of recession is 2 quarters of negative growth, which has happened in the US. And far from negative growth, we have the world's highest growth. Then the other thing is you should have low growth and high inflation to be called stagflation. We have just the opposite. We have high growth and moderate inflation below the rest of the world. So there is no question of that. Is why Bloomberg surveys and others are saying that there is zero chance of stagflation or recession in India. Look, I want to conclude by saying that you cannot minimize the fact that 800 million people got grains and food throughout the last almost 2.5 years, starting from the pandemic. Now, this has been made possible by the Modi government's very conservative fiscal control of the economy. Remember, 2 years ago, the rest of the world was throwing money at the problem, and the Modi government was targeting money at the poor. Now, you, Rajdeep, neither you nor Manish nor I may have received those food grains help. So maybe the audience in which we discuss this in Delhi's elite circles may not appreciate it. But 800 million people is a very large number who have been saved from inflation, who have been saved from the misery of the world economic situation because of these steps. And I can tell you that they dearly appreciate it.
You want a final quick last word, Mr. Tiwari?
Well, Rajdeep, if the government wants to be in denial, then nothing needs to be said. The fact remains the GDP curve is going down, the unemployment numbers are going up, headline inflation has been going up, consumer food price index remains at a very, very stubborn above 7%. And if the government is not prepared to wake up and wants to tell the country that all is well, then
we are better off than the rest of the world. The argument, Manish Tiwari, is consistent. We are better off, and some of the data does show that. The fact is, we are better off than several other major economies.
Well, essentially, Rajdeep, this argument that we are better off than the rest of the world does not really fill hungry stomach. And I'll leave it at that.
And I'll give 10 seconds to Jai Panda also to respond to that. Is there an element of denial, Jai?
Look, there is no element of denial. We have faced very real challenges, and everybody from Prime Minister Modi himself has addressed and faced those challenges squarely head-on, starting with the pandemic 2.5 years ago and over the last 6 months with the Ukraine conflict. And I've spelled out all the steps that have been taken, which is why India is better off than, even our neighbors are collapsing and major economies like the US are going into recession. So obviously, we are not living in a vacuum. We are impacted by what is happening in the rest of the world, especially by oil prices.
Right.
And we can't say that, that forget about what is happening in the rest of the world. We should uniformly in a vacuum, we should be in a perfect situation. That's not reality. That's not life. So considering the challenges we have faced, which the whole world has faced, we have done better than everybody else.
Let's leave it at that. Jai Panda, Manish Tiwari, always good to have two fine articulate voices who've come with their homework done, joining me here on the Face Off. Thank you so much. Let's take a break. When we return, we are turning to our other special tonight because an investigation into the Bengal cash for job scam reveals an even bigger money trail involving the key person, Arpita Mukherjee. We'll be exposing her money trail on the other side. You're watching the news today. News without the noise.
I don't read the news. I read between the lines to tell you the true version of events. The true story of our times.
To document grief, the toughest assignment for any journalist to be.
From those who matter.
Women politicians going to stick up for each other.
Of those who should matter. I document the truth. I don't distort the truth. I don't glamorize the truth. I don't gloss over the truth.
The ghosts of India's contentious medieval history have come knocking again.
I hustle for the truth. On the ground, in the newsroom, in the studio. I don't try to grab eyeballs.
I inform you to make you see the point.
To the Point with Preeti Chaudhary. At these times, only on India Today.
Is the monsoon season bringing relief to you from the hot summers? Well, what if we tell you that it can rain diamonds? Not certainly on Earth, but yes, it is raining diamonds on Uranus and Neptune. The temperature and pressure conditions on these planets are extreme. Due to this, carbon atoms can be crushed into diamonds. Uranus and Neptune are known by their unique blue shades. Both planets have a common condition to harden carbon atoms. But unfortunately, the inhospitable environment of the planet won't allow you to collect those diamonds. The blue color of these planets is due to methane. Methane has carbon in it. The carbon can be crushed by immense pressure that happens in the atmosphere. And when it gets hot and dense inside the planets, these diamonds are formed and accumulated. This causes them to rain in the atmosphere. Tell us what you think about this unique phenomena.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices.
To tonight's big news break here on India Today, we've tracked down the companies linked to the key to the cash for jobs scam in West Bengal. Arpita Mukherjee, the alleged mismatch in one address was listed by a company. No worker, no business was found at other addresses that were listed in her company documents. While the company claims business activity, no activity actually took place on the ground. So clearly there were a string of Benami companies, it appears, that Arpita Mukherjee, the key accused in that scam and whose houses lots of cash has been found, appears to have been working through a tangled web of Benami companies. Today, our correspondent Munish has tonight's big exclusive. Take a look.
This is what 6 officials of the Enforcement Directorate discovered in their first raid on a 2-bed apartment of a former model and actor. 21 crore and 90 lakh in cash, and a haul of gold jewellery and foreign exchange. And 5 days later, this is what the ED seized from another apartment of Arpita Mukherjee. Banknotes worth 27 crore and 90 lakh, and gold and foreign currency worth 5 crore. A friend of former West Bengal Minister Partha Chatterjee, Arpita Mukherjee was also found to be listed as director of 3 companies based in Kolkata. India Today took a deep dive into the trail. We first show you how these companies were shown to be operating on paper. In company documents, Symbiosis Merchant Private Limited, incorporated on March 21, 2011, is involved in the wholesale business of a variety of goods. Arpita Mukherjee got a co-director called Kalyan Dhar on July 1, 2021. On paper, Century Engineering Private Limited is involved in manufacturing of special purpose machinery. Arpita Mukherjee was appointed its director on November 9, 2011, and then enters Kalyan Dhar as another director in 2018. Incorporated on October 29, 2014, AK Entertainment Private Limited is shown to be involved in entertainment. Arpita Mukherjee was its first director. Kalyan Dhar named its second director in 2018, the same year when he became director of Century Engineering Private Limited along with Arpita. We tracked the registered addresses of the 3 companies one by one. This is the building that's supposed to house AK Entertainment Private Limited. No signboard, but a slip pasted on a mailbox greets us at the entryway. When we spoke to the guard on duty, he revealed that the premises operates as a banquet hall instead.
नया बच्चे का प्रोग्राम नहीं होगा। अच्छा, नया प्रोग्राम नहीं होगा। अच्छा, अगर ईडी रेड किया ना, हाँ, उसी के लिए बंद है। अच्छा, 31 तारीख में बुक था, उसमें वो काम हो रहा है। वो लोग परमिशन दे के किया है। अच्छा, तो मैरिज हॉल है बेसिकली। इच्छे मैरिज हॉल है। तो इसके कौन पार्थ तक है? वो मालूम नहीं। अच्छा, लेकिन यहाँ कोई ना कोई साहब तो आते होंगे ना? हाँ, वो पार्थो साहब में 2 बार में देखा है। अच्छा, अर्पिता में देखा है। अच्छा, पार्थो साहब को भी देखा, अर्पिता को देखा।
We next found out a mismatch in the address of AK Entertainment as mentioned in the company papers and as available in the records of Kolkata Municipal Corporation. In municipal records, the same 95 Rajdanga Main Road address is registered in the name of one Krishan Gopal Kar. We tracked the Kar family in the same neighborhood. Sanjeev Kar is the son of the man under whose name the address is registered. He claimed that the building AK operated out of was not 95 Rajdanga Main Road in the first place. Kar claimed his family was in possession of the same address and that company used it wrongfully under its banner.
95 राजडंगा जो प्रेमिसेस नंबर है वो आपका है, मेरा फादर का है, आपके फादर का है, ठीक है। मेरा घर में जो टैक्स पे रहा है, कहीं वो तो इलीगल है, अभी पता चला। उसका तो कोई डॉक्यूमेंट से नहीं है पेपर से। तो प्लॉट नंबर क्या है? ED 10, 11, 12। ओके, 3 प्लॉट लेके एक बिल्डिंग बनाया है।
Municipal records confirmed the Kars have been paying the property tax of the same premises for the past several years, identified as the official address of Arpita's AK Entertainment Private Limited on paper. We now investigated AK's business and finances. Company documents show exponential growth since its incorporation in 2014. Documents accessed by India Today also show the same company bought a 1,187 square foot apartment worth 75 lakh in Kolkata's Diamond City South. The payment made through 2 bank accounts. The Diamond City apartment is the same property from where the ED found 27.90 crore in cash. Officials suspect AK could be a shell company registered in the name of Arpita, and Partha Chatterjee was using it to infuse black money by way of cash and through property deals. In search of Symbiosis Merchants Private Limited, the wholesale goods company with Arpita Mukherjee as its director since 2011, we reached its Belghadia address registered in company documents. No signboard, no banner. Turns out it's the same place Arpita Mukherjee's mother lives in. No trace of any company operating out of this old building. No staff, no worker either. But according to documents accessed by India Today, the company held its annual mandatory meetings at the same address. Symbiosis Merchants also maintained financial statements. The place looks familiar. It's the same Diamond City apartment from where the ED hauled unaccounted cash late last month. But on paper, it houses Century Engineering Private Limited, which had Arpita Mukherjee as its director for almost 11 years now. No staff, no workers. But the so-called company is also regular in issuing financial statements. With Munish Pandey in Delhi and Mohammad Hizbullah in Kolkata, a special investigative report by India Today.
The Benami company trail of Arpita Mukherjee, exclusive report from Munish Pandey. Okay, let's end tonight on a happy note. There are lots of sports I love. Now, till the other day, one of the sports I didn't know much about was lawn bowls. But today, it's the buzz of the day because India have won a historic gold in the lawn bowls after our women's team defeated South Africa 17-10 in a thrilling final. The first time ever that India has ever won a medal at lawn bowls in any international competition. Each and every one of our heroines, as I call them, need to be saluted today. They are the stars of India's great win in lawn bowls today. Let's name all of them because they will not be known to many of you. They come from different parts of the country, but our four heroines, as I'm calling them today, are
absolutely tremendous.
Rupa Rani Tirki, Pinky Singh, Lovely Chaube and Nayanmoni Saikia. We hadn't heard of their names till only the other day. Today they've done the country very proud, defeating South Africa to lift the first ever lawn bowls gold for India. Great gold medal for the Indians. The golden girls tearful there after winning in lawn bowls, one of the oldest sports in the Commonwealth, the colonial sport which we've defeated even England and others in Birmingham.
Of the women's fours.
And that wasn't the only reason to celebrate today. One more big reason to celebrate: India's tennis men's team, led by Sharat Kamal, Harpreet and others, have also won in the TT tournament, and remarkable performance by them as well. Let's congratulate each and every member of that team. Sharat Kamal has of course been someone who's been leading Indian table tennis over the years, so he is of course the big hero of that. But also congratulations to Harmeet Desai and Satyan Gyanashekaran. They won the doubles and that clinched us a 3-1 victory over Singapore, defending their Commonwealth Games title. I want to let you in on a little secret. My second sport in school after cricket was table tennis, and we have a great tradition of TT in this country, stretching back to Neeraj Bajaj, Kamlesh Mehta and others in the 1970s, and now we are at the top of the Commonwealth Games. Great news, 2 golds today, Commonwealth Games, TT and lawn bowls. Do Google more on lawn bowls. It's a sport for the future. Thanks for watching. Stay well, stay safe. Let's hope for many more medals in the days ahead at the Commonwealth Games. Tonight, badminton should give us another gold. Bye for now. Stay well, stay safe. Good night, Shubhratri. Jai Hind. Namaskar and congratulations to our golden women and men.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices.
Digi Yatra is going to be implemented in India from 31st August. It will allow passengers to catch their flight quickly if they are in a hurry. So basically, the Digi Yatra allows facial recognition technology or biometric-based digital processing of passengers done at the airport. It will be functional at the airports of 7